Hi, good day everyone. So we are now on our next lesson. So this is part of our tour guiding module. So we are now going to discuss about developing your own tour guide spiel or commentaries. So pag sinabi natin tour guide spiel or commentaries, these are the things that we're saying or stating or presenting to our guests or tourists while during the conduct of our tour. So without further ado, let's go now to the main topic. Okay, but before we go there, here's some of the outline that I prepared for this lesson. So our topic outline will be as follows. First, we're going to learn about the tour guiding do's and don'ts. So while conducting the tours, these are essential for us to really have the railings or what we call the framework on how to really come up with the good commentaries that are not um, negative about the place that we're presenting. For example, if we're presenting our national landscapes or national landmarks, of course, it is essential for us to be patriotic and positive about that place. Kasi we are at the end of the day, tour guides are the salesperson and the representative and the ambassador of our country, our culture, and our history and our people as a Filipino nation. So of course, it's very imperative for us to become positive. And of course, wala naman kasi ibang magbebenta niyan kundi tayo-tayo rin or mga Filipinos. Now at the same time, of course, these are some reminders of the things that we should not do while we are engaged or we're doing the conduct of tour guiding, because these are would adversely affect our degree of professionality. Okay, next. I will enumerate the four different types of commentaries as prescribed by the textbook or by our reference books. Sources of commentaries, where to look at, how would you look that, and of course, how would you come up with the unique commentaries. No, so tuturuan ko kayo or tutulungan kayo how would you come up with this commentaries that you would truly develop on as your own, diba? Next, the differentiation of presentation and interpretation skills. And of course, finally, and the last, the application. So these are the techniques on delivering commentaries. Okay, so let's proceed. Now, for tour guiding do's and don'ts, these are the essential. These are the essential natin, no? So if you have something that you can add on, or if you know tour guides, if you conduct an interview with tour guides, pwede nyo ilagay ito. So these are the very basic, no? So but of course, as you progress in this particular discipline or particular field of profession, you might develop your own do's and don'ts, but these are the generals that I do really subscribe on. Okay, so the first thing is, of course, we have to be honest and sincere. Of course, people has this capacity to become fake, no? So minsan pinepeki natin. Pero at the end of the day, you would realize na it takes a lot of effort to become the person that you're not to, di ba? It takes a lot of effort to fake your it's not really, di ba? It takes a lot of our awareness, our effort, our time to pretend a life that we're not that. We're not that living in this kind of lifestyle, right? So of course, nothing really beats the sincerity and honesty of an individual. Parang effortless siya, no? So in this profession, of course, you should be honest and sincere because honesty is the bedrock of trust, no? So if we are not honest about our business conduct, of course, people are not trusting us, diba? And of course, tour guiding relies on this tradition of honor and trust. No? So if people find you not trustworthy and the way you talk is not reflective upon your action, or your action tells another story besides your words, of course these are might have a very negative reputation. So of course hindi ka tataga sa industry natin pag ano, no? So we should be honest and sincere, especially with we're dealing with the tourists. Let's be honest. Pag sinabi natin honest and sincere, wala tayong personal interest, kaya tayo nagsasalita na ganitong comment because you're provoking them to purchase, or kaya kami sinasabi or discouraging them to buy in this particular shop. Baka wala ka palang interest doon or wala ka palang rebates kaya ayaw mo doon. So these are some of the things that you may consider in the profession. So, syempre, tour guide tayo, we have to better, of course, our main priority would be the welfare of our tourists. Next, we have to be positive and patriotic. Again, at the end of the day nga rin din, nothing really will take care of the nation or our country better than a Filipino, di ba? So, syempre, tayo kasi mga Pilipino, ang green sa atin yung love for our country, So, as a tour guide, we are blessed with this opportunity to really showcase the beauty and the wonders and also the uniqueness of our culture to different nationalities, di ba? And also, we are also, I could honestly say that tour guides are the press press release department of our nation in terms of the dealing of the our narrative as a nation to different nationality. Kasi syempre, imagine mo na lang, what if kung ibang nationality yung nagtutour guide sa ating place or sa ating nation as a country. Of course, their narrative will be tainted on their perception of their, of course, particular how our nation relates to their nation. Of course, yun ang kanilang ina-narrative dyan. Of course, as a Filipino tour guide, our narrative will be more positive. Hindi ko naman sinasabing bias. Of course, syempre, i-highlight natin yung magaganda. Kasi yung mga negative, na-highlight na siya masyado, di ba? So, it's about time to really focus on the positive and on the patriotic side of our nation. Of course, that also fosters the interest of the other nationality to our place, di ba? Next, be sensitive to operating environment. Yan. So we have to be mindful and we have to be aware of the things that are happening around our place. For example, you're talking a lot while your tourists are battling with the extreme hotness of the humidity of the place kasi syempre napakainit. So ikaw daldal ka na daldal, wala kang pakialam. So those things are really would affect yung credibility mo. And of course, they will not be interested in what you're trying to convey, di ba? Also, of course, syempre third world country tayo, there is some chance na merong mga situation na it will cause upon certain danger to our environment. For example, may mga namamalimos or there are some yun nga, unscrupulous individual or other entities that are lingering around na maaaring it will cause threat to our guests. So, of course, as a tour guide, we also act as a guard dog or watchdog for that. Next is establish rapport to our client. We have to establish rapport. What's having rapport? It's the, relationship or it's some sort of connection with our client. So if you're handling a big group, my advice to you is, of course, so you have to establish rapport with your group leader or tour escort. So these are the focal person that you could rely on whenever you are would want to deliver a message to the group, or these are the person that will help you along on how to manage the group in a better and fashionable way, diba? Ano siya kasi minsan kasi ginagawa natin sobrang laki na ng group, so we don't mind coordinate or we don't really learn or we don't really show this uh, parang sincerity to connect with them. So parang ganyan nararamdaman ng mga tourists yan. So if I were you, if it is a big group, I would like to search for the group leader, tour escort, and of course various stakeholders, di ba? Kasi may mga influencer yung group eh. So if certain group exists, there is always a group leader or influencer among the group. Now, ako normally at the start of the day, I ask them a question, where do you normally we ask this question, where do you belong or where you're from? So first time you ba dito? These are some of the questions that are vital for us to really have the fine-tuning of our commentaries. Syempre, pag first-timer nila, syempre they are much more interested. Of course, you have to showcase or you have to tell the commentaries that are on basic level. Now, if there are second-timer, third-timer, fourth-timer, or marami ng beses nagpunta sa place mo or dito sa sa lugar mo, perhaps they're not so much keen of course of the tour kasi sawa-sawa na sila. Maari siguro sumama lang sila sa tour because meron silang kasama na first timer or gusto lang nilang mapuntahan ulit siya dahil nga wala silang magawa sa buhay nila, di ba? So these are some perhaps you can add some little bit more value of your tour commentaries na something kakaiba, something na mas unusual before. So yun, those are some considerations that you might look in para mas masaya ang tour natin. Next. Of course, we have to encourage responsible and sensitive behavior to our client or our guests or our tourists. Um, Depende siya. So I think this one is, it depends on your market. Kasi if your market is a yun nga, well-educated market, medyo lucrative siya, as particularly the Westerners, yung mga Western countries natin, for example, European, yan, they are much more environmental conscious. So pag environmental conscious sila, there is a strong environmental conscious awareness sa lugar nila, nadadala nila siya dito sa Philippines. And in that sense, madali na rin sila. Let's say, if you're having a tour sa isang beach or riverside area, pwede maging part na activity mo with the consent of the tour operator, and of course, a group leader, is to bring a plastic bag so that you can yun nga, you can pick garbage along the way as part of your initiative, as part of our tour, or parang environmental call yun, di ba? So sa kanila natutuwa sila kasi that's part of their as part of their culture as a European citizen. So parang okay sa kanila yun, mas matutuwa nga sila. Normally we're also for yung mga other countries naman, if you are having this eco tour, siguro pwede nyo i-incorporate then how to encourage responsible behavior for our guests is, of course, you could incorporate yung tree planting activities, like for example, mangrove activities sa mga coastal areas. So tingin ko kahit if you're a foreigner, that would be a memorable experience for you. Especially if, di ba, yung seedlings mo, tapos may pangalan siya, o, di ba, may connection ka na sa lugar. So yung puno na yun, pag tumubo, pwede mo balikan, di ba? That's some sort, it forms a lot of bond for them. So yun, so we could explore these things para mas lalo natin ma-encourage yung kanilang responsible and sensitive behavior to our community, to our guests, or to our environment, di ba? So these are some limited ways that we can encourage them. So hindi example lang 'yon, pero hindi lang siya yung yun lang. Marami pa tayong pwedeng maisip kasi nga I mean tourism is really creative. There are lots of people, all walks of life, various needs and wants, diba? So it depends upon your judgment as a tour guide kung ano yung pwedeng magandang i-suggest natin sa tour operator. Okay? Next is, of course, establish good working in relationship with travel partners. Dito, pag nagtatanong sa'yo, ako, personally na-encounter ko to, pag nagtatanong sa'yo ng presyo, magkano kaya yung tour? Let's say, kung ako kukuha sa inyo diretsyo or direkta, magkano na yung tour ko? Of course, pag ganyan ang tanungan, you have to protect your middleman, and of course, your tour operator. So you can always refer them to contact your travel agent. Bakit? Kasi pag nagbigay ka ng presyo, mababa, ano yung isipin ng kliyente mo sa travel agent nila or sa tour operator na doon sila nag-book? Of course, siyempre, ang laki pala ng cut nito mga to, ang laki ng tubo. So, aawayin niya ngayon si travel agent, aawayin niya si tour operator. Ngayon, pag inaway si tour operator si travel agent, pabalikan ka ngayon. Ano yung pinagsasabi mo? Do you expect na may future booking ka pa makukuha sa tour operator sa travel agent na yun? Of course, wala na, di ba? Kasi sinira mo na yung relationship. For that, ako, very sensitive tayo pag prices, pag mga prices, future deal, pag kliyente ka ni ganito travel agent, huwag mo siyang susulutin. Kasi syempre, that's part of our work, conduct of honor or work honor natin or work system natin, no? So, ganun kasi sa industry. So, pag nakitang nanunulot ka, of course, walang susuporta sa'yo. Pag nakikitang matabil or very madali ka magsabi ng price, transparent ka, or either ways, di ba, pwede kang mura, pwede mahal. Kasi kung mahal ka naman, mahal pala yung tour guide na yun. Next time, huwag din natin siya kunin, di ba? May ganun expression. So, pag price, leave it to the channels na lang, no? So, you have to be discreet din na, normally, I ask them to, of course, that is, I think you better contact your travel agent because they will give you the best deal, di ba? Palaging ganon. So, palaging positive din na kontakin yung travel agent nyo because mas alam nila yung ginagawa nila and they will surely get you the best deal out of this transaction. So, palaging ganon. Huwag tayo magbibigay ng mga price kasi mahirap kasi yan. Okay? May mapapahamak at may mapapahamak. Next. let's be mindful of our client perspective. Ito naman, it's additional rule ko is because sometimes, personally I experience this. Kasi if you're having a tour guiding activity or may tourist ka na Japanese, of course, syempre, hindi naman gano'ng kagandaan ng history ng Japan sa Philippines, no? Of course, we have this Spanish, American, and Japanese era. Ano ba nangyari sa Japanese era? Di ba puro gera, puro war and destruction. So of course, let's be mindful about our perspective about them. Siyempre, medyo negative sa kanila, di ba? Your tourist is Japanese, tapos tinutour mo siya dun sa Intramuros, nasira during the Japanese War, di ba? So, siyempre, you have to balance the equation. Of course, let's be mindful about their feeling. Baka mamaya negative na pala sa kanila, hindi lang nila sinasabi. Kaya ako po nagtutour ako ng mga Japanese, normally concentration ko mostly on the pre-Jap or pre-Hispanic or Hispanic or pre-Hispanic area ng mga Japanese. Na yung mga Japanese here, they come here as a merchant. Also, they have also a talent for blacksmith, no. So sila yung mga isa sa mga other nationality that helps shape the wall city of Manila. So yun siya. So yun, ang focus ko mostly on the during the Spanish era. Kasi nga, though syempre you have to discuss about the World War II, na yung obvious naman yun. Pero of course, medyo i-tame or ano mo lang siya, tone down mo lang siya without diluting the facts. No? So yun siya. Or presenting it in a more neutral way. Kasi yung mga textbook kasi natin, pag binasa mo, no, parang masyado siyang bias against Japanese. Or there are some textbook naman pag Spanish tourist na may tinutour mo, masyado namang bias against the Spanish. Parang feeling mo wala ginawa ng maganda yung mga Spanish, di ba? Look at your textbook, yung textbook natin sa elementary, high school. Parang masyadong mga vindicated yung mga Spanish. Pero in reality, meron din naman, meron naman din ng good. They have contributed so much for the Philippines, di ba? Kasi hindi naman sila magtatagal ng 300 years kung wala silang contribution to us. Diba? So let's be neutral. Of course, let's be mindful about the perspective of our client. Okay. Next is keep things organized. So of course, syempre nothing really is a disaster when things are not doing as planned. Let's say of the itinerary, there you have the debate, iniba mo itinerary. Let's say yung oras ng kain is 11, iniba-iba mo siya. Gusto mo 2 na lang kasi busog ka pa. Pero yung grupo mo gutom na. So of course, let's be organized and kasi syempre, of course, we have two different types of person. No? Yung isang organized tapos yung isa hindi naman masyadong organized. Of course, irritation sa mga organized type of person yung hindi nakikita nilang hindi organized yung kanilang day-to-day activity. So that's really bothering them. Okay? So for that, let's stick to the itinerary and to the plan. Next, make decision for the group. Of course, you're gonna please everyone, but you have to make a decision. The decision should be made on the welfare of all, diba? Now, it really happens naman, you have to make decision kasi normally, everything is pre-arranged. So, bibihira yung opportunity or challenge na yan na you have to take the decision for the group. So, bibihira lang yan. Next, of course, let's avoid guesswork or propaganda. Bakit? Kasi it's a modern time now. We can also the tourists could now validate what they're trying to claim, or they could really confute, or pwede nilang i-contradict, or pwede nilang i-test kung tama yung sinasabi mo o hindi based on the ever powerful internet and cellphone, di ba? So, yun. So, of course, wag tayong manghuhula kasi nga pag nanghula ka, it destroy your reputation. Propaganda naman refers to those mga things na parang, let's say, politics. It's mostly you have this hidden agenda, or you have this hidden bias that you want to impart with a group. Yeah. So let's say maka Duterte ka, during your tour, puro Duterte, 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 positive. Pero syempre, hindi naman lahat ng sa grupo mo is pro Duterte. There would be anti Duterte depending on their perspective on the matter. Kasi for that, of course, we have to be neutral. Kasi at the end of the day, hindi nga natin mapiplease ng lahat. Pero syempre, wag naman natin bad tripping yung mga tao, di ba? So we have to take the safer zone or the neutral way of, yun nga, doon ka lang sa neutral. So, pwede mo rin naman siya i-present as pros and cons. Pwede mo sabihin na ito yung perspective ng mga Duterte fans or Marcos loyalists. Ito yung perspective naman ng mga anti-Marcos or anti-Duterte, di ba? You can have this perspective play. So bahala na silang mag-decide. So based on the perspective na gusto niyo showcase. But nevertheless, for me personally, I try to avoid yung politics, recent politics natin. It's really medyo away ang hanap mo pag yan ang pinag-uusapan. But of course, hindi maiwasan minsan nagtatanong sila kasi nga syempre they heard it from the news, di ba? Ikaw ba naman laman ka ng CNN saka international news, di ba? Especially President Duterte, masyado siyang kilala. So lalaman yan. Another thing is of course religion. But of course, our manner of presentation really affects kung medyo it will trigger argument or not. So, yun. You should be neutral. Next, avoid being a tape recorder. Okay, so normally if you're starting up as a tour guide, normally you will be tempted to memorize everything what you're trying to say. So, pag ganun kasi parang, wow, alam niya yung sinasabi niya. Pero memorize lang. Parang feeling mo, hindi galing sa kanyang puso. Parang may disconnect, no? So, parang guluhin ko kaya to. Parang may ganong peg, diba? So, yun. So, as a tour guide, we try to avoid memorizing our lines, our spiel. Or kung na-memorize mo siya or in-internalize mo siya by heart, hindi na siya ganun ka-obvious, di ba? Pero of course, huwag nating pa-obvious masyadong memorize natin yung line, di ba? Disaster yan kasi especially pag pinag-copy-paste mo lang naman siya sa Wikipedia. Naku, gusto mo sabayan ka pa ng kliyente mo or ng tourist mo, di ba? So of course, let's put personality to our commentaries, no? And of course, try to avoid being too much parang memory guy, no? Memorization trick lang to. Okay. Of course, lastly, but never insinuate for a tip, 'di ba? A tip earn is a tip earn, 'di ba? Huwag tayo manghingi, 'di ba? Hindi ka professional pag ganyan ang peg mo. Okay? Next. So now we have the 4 types of commentaries or tour guide spiels. So ito sa isang tour, essential po makikita natin itong 4. Now, yung 4 na yan ay normally nangyayari siya sa tunay na buhay. It's pangyayari bilang sa tour guide, no? So the first one is, ito yung pinaka-importante, tingin ko dapat sinasabi. Kaya nga po yung kanyang description is required information or commentaries. So pag sinabi natin required commentaries or sometimes we call it mandatory commentaries or mandatory tour guide spiel, these are the informations that are essential for the conduct of the tour. So meaning to say, kung hindi mo siya sinabi, magkakaproblema ka during your tour. Example, the name of the tour guide, your name. Diba? Unang dating mo pa lang, you have to introduce yourself. Hi, good evening. Of course, you have to greet first. So good morning, guys. I'm Argel. I will be your tour guide for today. And Mr. Kevin, our driver. So, diba? So these are important. The name of the tour guide, your name, and the name of the driver. Very important siya kasi, let's say, naligo si client, pwede niyang hanapin yung tour guide. Pagtanong niya lang doon sa bus stop or pagtanong niya sa car park, at least malolocate, malalaman kung sino yung tour guide, diba? Normally, yung tour guide name natin, may kanya-kanya tayo mga, parang artista yan, diba? Pag artista kasi, minsan yung pangalan mo masyadong mahaba, minsan pangalan mo masyadong kakaiba, minsan pangalan mo medyo hindi nga kagandahan, diba? So, minsan iniiba ng or binibigyan ka ng screen name as a tour guide. For example, ako, Argel, medyo okay naman siya kasi hindi naman siya ganun ka-familiar, hindi naman siya ganun ka-common, hindi naman siya ganung mahirap tandaan. Kaysa bigyan kita ng pangalan na, let's say, John, tour guide John. Sino John? Diba? Daming John. Diba? So, you come to, for the meantime, we can use our name, no? So, wala namang problema dyan. Pero, may iba kasi tour guide, dahil common yung name nila, they come up with a screen name. Example, Wowie, diba? Wowie. Tour guide Wowie. Tour guide tour guide mahusay, di ba? Mga ganun. So, iba naman medyo may pagka-Pilipino. So, tour guide Pinoy, di ba? Ganun. Parang may mga dating silang, parang branding din yan, di ba? So, parang ganun. Ganun ang peg nila. So, their name is their brand, di ba? Next. Besides sa name of the tour guide, importante rin po yung time, details. No? For example, meeting time, kailan kayo susundin, kailan yung ihahatid sa airport, kailan kayo mag-meet, saan kayo mag-meet, anong oras kayo mag-meet, anong kakainin, etc. These things. No? So everything that is related to the itinerary. So before kayo nag-uumpisa ng siguro ng tour, ito yung mandatory nating proseso, no? So first, you have to introduce yourself. You have to introduce the name of the tour guide and the driver. And then you have to introduce, if you have a company representative, you have to introduce the company representative, yung escort, or yung pinadala ng company na nag-form ng group na yon. Another thing is, of course, you have to familiarize the tourists with the itinerary. So normally, for the day, ako, ang ginagawa dyan is, binibrief mo muna yung kliyente, what they expect for the day. For example, or we are day 1 of our tour, we are going to this place, it's ganun-ganon, and then followed by the next stop would be ganun-ganon. And then, of course, we will have a lunch, tapos anong klaseng lunch siya. And then, after lunch, we are expecting to visit another site, ganyan. And then finally, we're expecting to return at the hotel at ganitong oras, but subject to traffic conditions. So, ganon. So, at least they could plan. Ngayon, if the, minsan kasi may kliyente na no, but along the way na yan, as you progress, kasi minsan may mga kliyente ayaw nang bumaba or ayaw nang bumalik sa hotel. So for that, you can remind them later na, okay, in this or okay, you can, after this point, you can leave and return to the hotel on your own. If you don't want, you can hop in the bus and the bus will return back to the hotel. Ganon, diba? So these are the procedures. Now, if you're dealing with foreign tourists naman, so dealing with Chinese nationality, Indian, American, etc. Of course, you have to inform them about the number 1, yung exchange rate. Number 2, ano yung itsura ng pera. Importante yun pera. Siyempre, these are foreigners. Ako normally, in-orient siya sa itsura ng pera. Especially 1,500 saka 100. Kasi yan ang mga common na gagamitin ng, especially 1,500. Kasi may fake, di ba? Madali silang, they're really prone for those yung mga scammers natin. No? So, pag madali silang mabigyan ng fake money. And of course, reminders how to you regarding to exchange rate or saan sila magpapalit, saan sila pwede magpapalit, or may Philippine peso na sila or wala. Kasi pwede naman, di ba? Actually, pwede ka magpapalit sa kanila or pwede mo sila i-refer sa isang forex center. Kasi kung forex center naman siya, let's say SM or sa bangko, pipili yan. So, mababadip sila at the end of the day. So, better yet, you can refer them to a more money changer. Another thing is, of course, yung weather situation. So, weather is, you expect may rain mamaya. So, of course, remind them to bring their umbrella or their rain gear with them. So, kung wala naman, of course, remind them na mainit. So, you bring your water with you and shades and glasses or hats. Or, of course, your sunscreen lotion. Yeah, so these things. Another thing is, of course, yung ating one, importante rin po sa part as required information or commentaries yung safety precautions natin, especially if we're visiting open spaces. Hindi naman sa nananakot tayo, pero that is part of our procedure. Pero kung very minimal naman threat, for example, sa Intramuros, kahit huwag mo na sabihin yan. Kasi syempre, guardiado naman yan. Pero if you're dealing with crowded areas, let's say a special type of tour siya, let's say Quiapo, special type of tour. Kasi normally, yung ating mga mainstream tour won't go to Quiapo because that, alam mo na, maraming challenges doon. Of course, you have to remind them of the conditions and what they're trying to expect. Ano yung expect nila doon na dapat nila expect na hindi naman talaga nila na-expect. Alam niyo yun? Kasi these are tourists So parang akala nila okay lang or ganon. Pero pag actual na, parang beyond their imagination pala. Mga ganon. So yun. Another thing is, ano pa kaya? Okay, you can also teach them how to, ako, medyo ito useful din to for them, is how to make tawad or make haggle, no? So, sa Philippines kasi, uso yung haggle or tawad-tawad. Yan. So, pwede mo silang turuan simple Tagalog words, paano tumawad, ganyan. So, you can share this. These are some of the things that might be useful for your client. So that is required. Yung tawad-tawad, pwedeng hindi, pwedeng oo. Kasi hindi naman siya ganun ka-essential. Now, the emphasis here is the required information should be the essentials. So kung wala ito, hindi gaganing tour natin na maayos. Okay? So these are essentials ha. Kasama dyan yung mga, alam mo na, yung, let's say, lunch. Anong klaseng lunch siya? Plated ba? Buffet? Saan? Diba? So yung mga ganun. Next, informative commentaries. These are the information or yung tinatawag natin, these are the main meat of the tour. Ito yung mga sinasabi mo, facts and figures, story, narration, narrative about the landscape or our monuments, our beautiful sceneries in the Philippines. So basically, may para tong tour guide ka, 'di ba? Ikaw yung tour guide, ikaw yung narrator. Let's say may magandang canvas here, painting. So hindi mo siya ma-appreciate kung walang label, walang subtitle, walang storya, 'di ba? So ikaw tour guide, lalagyan mo siya ng storya para ma-appreciate mo siya. Kasi kung picture lang, ma-appreciate naman kaso lang kulang, 'di ba? So siya, lalagyan mo pa siya ng narration, story, para mas naging interesante or mas very meaningful ng kanilang interrelationship, diba? So ikaw, bibigyan mo siya ng story. So yung informative na yan, commentaries, these are your facts, figures, na presented in a entertaining and informative way or edutain, diba? So nag-educate ka at the same time, nag-entertain ka. So hindi pwedeng puro entertain lang, hindi naman pwedeng puro educate lang. You have to trade off yung kanilang balance. There should be a perfect mix of entertainment and education part, di ba? Next, requested commentaries. Yan naman yung mga Q&A, question and answer portion. Kasi, syempre, they have their own curiosity naman, level of curiosity, or they have their own unique interest, no? So, ito si mga tourists, normally magtatanong sila. May mga simpleng tanong, madaling sagutin, may mga tanong naman out of this blue. So, mga ganon. So, for example, ako, ang common na encounter kong tanong sa akin palagi is President Duterte, why President Duterte is so popular in the Philippines? Mga ganon. So, syempre, mahirap sagutin yan, diba? Explain ka pa. So, is it true in the Philippines that you have, you're using water bucket in your toilet? Mga ganon, may nagtanong sa akin. No? So, curiosity lang. This is sa States, hindi naman common na, syempre, aminin na natin, sa Philippines ka lang, yung mga ordinaryong banyo, pag mayaman kasi, wala kang timba, wala kang, galon, or wala kang whatsoever do sa banyo mo, no? Wala kang balde, wala kang timba, wala kang galon, wala kang drum sa banyo mo, di ba? Pang mahirap yun, pang third world country masyado yun. Kasi normally, pag ganyan tanungan, di ba? Wala ka na, normal toilet, walang ganun, no? Sa Philippines ka lang, yung mga mid-income to low-income family lang may ganun. Kasi, ini-expect na nila, kulang ang tubig, may water interruption, kaya may ganun. Pero kung mayaman ka, if you're living in first world country, you don't expect na may water bucket sa CR mo. Okay? So that is one question na tinanong sa akin na I was surprised kasi syempre parang common sa akin pero sa kanila hindi siya common, di ba? Next is optional. Optional is ito na may mga jokes, anecdotes, pwedeng mga commercial break yan. So optional information. Diba? Dito sumasama yung mga jokes, anecdote, story, commercial break, yung mga patawa mo, pakanta yan. So it makes the tour unique and distinct. Ito what gives your personality as a tour guide. This type of commentaries, dito pinapakita yan. Okay? Next. Oops, bumalik tayo. Wrong. Next. So what are the sources of your commentaries or tour guide spiels? Saan ako makakuha ng script ko? Kasi para kang script writer dito, you're going to formulate your own script. So ngayon, ano ba yung mga resources mo para makagawa ka ng sasabihin mo or tour guide script mo? So we have the primary data and secondary data. Pag sinabi kong primary data, these are the data that you first-hand experience mo. These are, for example, you are living in that particular place. So syempre, first-hand experience mo yun. You're already narrating your life story, di ba? Primary data nakita mong nangyari, so kinukwento mo. So basically, the source of the information is you. So, in that sense, tour guides are really capable, or the tour guide are really, ano siya, no? Magiging, tawag dito, uh, credible ka if you are local of that place. For example, if you're a tour guide, let's say you are based in Japan, you want to see Japanese tour guide, right? You don't want to see Filipino tour guide touring Japan, or you don't want to see American guide or American tour guide touring Japan. You want the local because you want the primary data, you want the primary knowledge, or you have the first-hand experience in that place, diba? So that what makes that is the ano no. So nabubulol ako, sorry. That is yun nga, it makes the tour guide really unique on their own kasi sila yung mga may first-hand experience. So, iba yung tour guide na nakatira talaga sa lugar kaysa sa tour guide na kakapunta niya lang doon or kaka-migrate niya lang. So, syempre, iba yung perspective niya. So, that sets an expertise no sa lugar. So now, if you don't have the primary data with you, hindi ka taga doon, you're not born in that place, you're not familiar firsthand with the culture, secondary data will be helpful for you. Now, this is very important for yung mga historical figures and cultures and mga history and details natin na, of course, wala na tayong access kasi hindi na tayo nabubuhay sa panahon ni Dr. Rizal. These are already gone. So, our next best thing for primary data would be, of course, secondary data that will come from the institution publication. For example, if you would want to tour Intramuros, the best sources of data for us as tour guide or wannabe tour guide is, of course, to secure yung facts and figures or yung kanilang information sa Intramuros administration because they have the bulk of the information there that can use for your tour guide script, no? So, libre naman siya eh. Actually, pupunta ka lang or you can search to their website, di ba? Or kung ayaw niyo naman sa Intramuros administration, you can go to the National Historical Commission, di ba? Or the National Archives or the National Library. So, they have reputable publications for that. Now, kung ayaw niyo pa rin, you can search for reputable books or journal. One good example of book that could be a source of commentaries for you in Intramuros would be the book. They have a copy in the IA. Ang pangalan ng book is Ciudad Moral. Yan. So that's a very beautiful book. It's all about Intramuros and its relationship with the Spanish galleon trade and also the historical importance of the walled city of Manila to the booming community, or in our sense of being a nation as a Filipino. Yeah. Of course, the OT publication really helps, and other online materials. No? So you can cite the UST kasi sa UST they have a good collection of reference books based on the primary data or based on recorded documents. Now you can interconnect that with other reference abroad. Let's say the Spanish galleries or Spanish museums or Spanish historical institutes or commissions. Diba? Pwede mo i-correlate yan to really delve in with the nitty-gritty of our national heroes and of course during the Spanish era. Yeah. Next, okay. Now, in this part, we're going to discuss the difference of presentation and interpretation. So, again, in a summary, what is presentation? So basically, a presentation is a process of communicating a topic to an audience, which is typically a demonstration, introduction or lecture, or speech meant to inform, persuade, inspire, motivate, or build goodwill, or to present new idea or product. For short, pag sinabi yung presentation, you are presenting a thing, an idea, an object to an audience. For example, I hereby present to you the painting, di ba? So tell something about the painting, why it is important, and how who made the painting. Basically, in presentation, you're asking or you're answering the question about 5W and 1H. So what, when, why, where, di ba? And of course, how, di ba? So these are the things. This are presentation. Okay. So ngayon, presentation, there are different types of presentation. Of course, the first and the most obvious type of presentation would be informative. So you're presenting this information or you're presenting this data because of the intention to inform. So as a tour guide, ito yung pinaka ano natin, no, main type of presentation. We are presenting this information for them to be informed. Okay. So may mga suggested structure tayo how to do that. Now, in your tour guide's commentaries or in your tour spiel, you might include or modify or integrate some, or if you want one or two, yan. So bala kayo. So your presentation or tour guide commentaries could be chronological in order. Let's say pre-Spanish time, Spanish time, American time, Japanese time, and of course post-war. So that's our common chronological order that presented in textbooks, no. But for tour guiding, you can also do that. But of course, syempre, you have to take consideration of the place. Kasi yung place natin, hindi naman lahat siya could be chronologically correlated based on the place. No? Next, place. So yung site mismo, doon ka na lang magbe-base. Let's say, lahat ng nangyari sa site na to, kwento mo. Diba? Next, another site, kwento mo. So, in a sense, okay siya, magagamit mo sa tour guiding, no? Kaso lang, the main drawback here is parang wala siyang harmony, walang interrelationship among the different sites na pinuntahan mo. Kasi for example, pupunta ka ng let's say San Agustin Church, tapos punta ka ng National Museum, tapos punta ka ngayon ng MOA, ano yung relationship niya? Diba? Pero pwede mo naman siya i-deliver na okay din na gano'n. Kumbaga sa pwede na, pantawid pamilya program, makakatawid ka naman. Pero parang, if you're tourist, especially yung mga, mga European, medyo intellectual, mga American, parang medyo may sila, may kulang. Kasi parang walang harmony. Parang nagbigay ka ng nagbigay ka ng different flavor, pero iba, contradicting yung kanilang mga taste. Walang main harmony. Kumbaga sa nakakain ka ng buffet pero hindi maganda yung food selection, di ba? Parang okay naman, busog ka, pero hindi nga lang in harmony yung gusto mong kainin. Hindi kasi maganda yung food selection, di ba? Next, cause and effect. So kasi ito ginawa mo, kaya ito nangyari. So that's common, no? Pero ang major drawback nito, medyo siya, no? Hindi naman lahat ng cause could be pinned down to a certain condition, or hindi naman lahat ng effects isang cause lang niya. So marami. So ang major drawback niya, paano pag multi causality, or let's say maraming cause kaya nagkaroon ng effect, or isang cause lang maraming effect, di ba? So yun ang major drawbacks niya. But of course, that is a good way of presenting data on a micro perspective, yung narration ng story mo based on a certain object. Yung parang micro level lang siya. Pero pag ginawa mo macro level, let's say your whole commentaries or your whole term mo is based on the cause and effect, pwede naman, kasi it will take a lot of challenge on your part. So depende na lang siya. If you're creative, you can come up with a good cause and effect analogy. Diba? Depende pa rin naman siya. Logical, of course, based on logic. And of course, alam naman natin, di ba, ano ba mas interesado sa inyo? Logic or story? Siyempre, mas gusto natin story, di ba? We are much more madali tayo makarelate sa kwento ng tao rather than philosophy rather than reasoning, di ba? So, syempre tayo matutulog na tayo sa reasoning. Pero mas madali natin maintindihan yung mga kwento about love story, yung mga kwento about uh, yung desperation, because they have the human emotion, di ba? Kumbaga sa ano nga, if dalawa kasing klase ng tao, you are either emotional or more logical. Pag logical ka, of course, you go with logic. But of course, aminin na natin, ilan lang ba yung logical sa atin? Di ba? Mostly, lahat ng karamihan ng tao is more emotional appeal tayo. Di ba? So kaya mas mabenta sa atin ang mga soap opera, mga K-pop drama, ang mga kung ano-ano, mga music about love song, yung mga ganun. Because these are all appealing to emotion. Imagine niyo na lang, di ba? Yung love song nyo, hindi siya love song, it's a logical song. Gusto niyo ba marinig yun? Of course, di ba? Boring. Di ba? What makes people interested is not because of the logic, but because of the emotion. Diba? So, yun lang yung drawbacks na yun kapag logical ka masyado. Hindi lahat makaka-relate kasi, you know, depending on your level power ng brain mo or reasoning mo. So, sad to say, hindi naman lahat pantay-pantay. Okay. Next, thematic. So, thematic based on theme. So, personally, that's one of my favorite choice or my favorite structure and presenting information type of presentation. It's based on narrative, based on themes. So let's say my theme today is about yun nga, Japanese market gamit mga Japanese stories ka. Of course, you pattern them to them na ang theme mo is all about Japan. Ngayon syempre kung mixed group siya, may Japanese, may Chinese, may ano syempre, adjust mo yung theme mo. Hindi ka pwedeng it's all about Japan and its relationship, Philippine Japanese relationship, 'di ba? Parang hindi siya appropriate. So syempre you have to mix, 'di ba? You can showcase siguro yung multilateral siguro you can showcase yung multicultural dynamics during the time ng pre-Hispanic, Spanish and American and then Japanese, no? How does different nation interacts and how does the Philippines as a staging ground or playground for different powers during the World War II. Mga ganun, you can present that as based on theme. Pero again, it all depends upon your perusal as a tour guide. So, pwedeng mas mag-excel ka sa chronological or place to place or cause and effect or logical or thematics. Depends sa'yo. But for me, I'm more of the thematic type. So, based on themes. Okay? Next. So besides information, we have instructional, persuasive, and decision making. So these are the types of presentation. But basically, as a tour guide, we are much more concerned about the information and instructional because we give instructions. Okay, pero bibihira lang na may instructions natin. Normally, ang ating mga instructions is sa kasusunduin, kailangan susunduin, paano kaya hatid, sa kakikitain, those things. More than that, parang bibihira na tayo. Okay? Next. Now we go now with the interpretation. We're done with the presentation. What about interpretation? What's the difference? Okay. If you ask me, presentation basically, here's a painting. Yeah. So basically, you're touching the subtle grounds or basically you're touching the superficial layers of the painting. So ito, di-describe ko lang sa yung team, sino gumawa, anong kulay, anong medium. Let's say, this painting is made by Armando Perasso. The the materials that we used was acrylic paint, and of course the theme is a woman. Okay, woman. The title of the work is Untitled siya. So meaning to say the artist has no particular representation or particular parang inaalo niya yung mga viewer to have their own interpretation about their work, di ba? Parang ganun siya. Now, speaking of interpretation, so what is interpretation? We are merely going beyond the superficial conventions of the shape, colors, facts, figures, yung bare bones niya, no? So now here, interpretation, we're looking for the relationship. We're looking for the interconnectivity of the relationship. How does one part relates to another part? How does this part makes a contribution or makes an impact to a different or the synergistic effect of that particular part to another part. So sa painting, you can also have that kind of interpretation. Okay, now I would like to cite the definition of Interpretation Canada for defining what is interpretation here. Any communication process designed to reveal meanings, relationships of culture, and natural heritage to the public through first-hand involvement with an object, artifact, landscape, or site. So basically, it calls upon these action words: communication, design, reveal meanings, relationship. Okay, so these are the action words. So pag sabi communication, again, our previous lesson, it is, again, a series of you would want to convey a message from the receiver, from the speaker going to the receiver. If the message is, convey properly as what the intention is all about, okay, it's what's the intended message, nakuha ni receiver, therefore the communication, there is a communication. Okay. Next, reveal meanings. Because meanings are not really expressed in superficial, no? So, syempre, nakikita natin itong work of art na to as is, pero mayroon pa siyang other meaning besides its conventional form. Diba? Mayroon siyang uh, mas malalim pang kahulugan or value besides the aesthetic looks lang niya. Diba? So, this is what we call reveal meanings and relationship. Kasi may mga nakatagong meaning siya na, of course, as a tour guide, it's our duty to share this hidden meaning. Kasi syempre, madali naman nila i-search yan sa internet eh. Our added value activity here is to find this hidden meaning and try to relate them to the tourist's own life, personality, and perspective. Diba? Making it relate, parang trabaho mo, you are a bridge, no? Iko-connect mo yung tourist sa lugar, sa yung tourist site. Okay? Or you're connecting the tourist to particular artifact or artwork. Okay. Now, the classic reference book, or I could say textbook for this particular aspect of tour guiding is the notable work of Freeman Tilden. So it's basically a classic in this particular field because it's also used in different across the tour guiding world. No, ang pangalan ng book is Interpreting Our Heritage, because this is a guide on interactive, participative way of creating museums, and as well as in conducting tours. No, so this is a his work really contributes in this particular discipline. So if you have time, of course I would ask you to read this book. If you don't have time, of course you can listen to this video, or you can search further information on the web. Okay. So based on the book, Tilden has prescribed principles on how to better manage, or how to better curate, or how to better incorporate interpretation to our itineraries, to our curation of our museums, curation of our, designing of our tourist sites and destination, as well as how the tour guide would have the dynamics in dealing with her, or how the tour guide would conduct his tour. Okay. So the first principle of Tilden is any interpretation does not somehow relate what is being displayed or described to something within the personality of experience of the visitor will be sterile. Sterile. So yeah. So ibig sabihin here is that number one, tatlo kasi ibig sabihin niya. First, if you're talking to a certain, if you're describing a concept, or if you're talking an idea, for example, Dr. Rizal is our national hero, and yet your background portrait, or we are located in a, let's say, Bonifacio Hall, of course, that's contradicting. It does not help in the explanation, right? So the ideal here, when you're conducting a tour guide, there is the evidence, para ka na sa courtroom. You have the evidence here, let's say the picture or the portrait of Dr. Rizal, and then you're discussing, or you're giving the commentaries about Dr. Rizal. So that's the first, the first level of this principle. So meaning to say Whenever you're conducting tour, you should be able to present the evidence. The evidence could be the landscape, the artifacts, the site, or the tourist destination itself. Okay, it should be based on what you're trying to say, based the evidence, diba? So evidence, your comments. Again, it's our work as a tour guide to become parang tayo yung kanilang subtitle, 'di ba? Kasi may movie ka, wala silang subtitle. Paano maintindihan ng tourist 'yon, ng foreigner, 'di ba? So ganun siya. So we are here to make more sense out of the pictures, out of the destination. Kasi on their own, they can look at, appreciate that in aesthetic level, but of course, they cannot really convey beyond the aesthetics, no? Beyond the ganda. Kasi syempre, maganda siya sa mata, pero may other value pa siya beyond aesthetic. It has cultural implication, historical implication. Siyempre, hindi nila appreciate yun kasi they're not capable of doing so. So, ikaw, tour guide, you're the one, it's your responsibility to convey this meaning, this hidden gem, diba? Next. Next level is, of course, you have to base on the personality or experience of the visitor. So, syempre, so ikaw naman daldal ka. Okay, so first level, no? So, Dr. Serizal, daldal ka about Dr. Serizal, anong klaseng estudyante, or anong klaseng, anong klaseng tourist siya. Let's say, nagdi-discuss ka about, ang mga tourist mo is mga Japanese. So, paano sila makaka-relate yan? Hindi nga nila kalala si Dr. Serizal, di ba? So of course, syempre hahanap ka ng paraan bakit dapat ma-interested yung mga Japanese na yun kay Dr. Sarisal. So one thing here is that you can cite the Dr. Sarisal visited their place. He has a girlfriend in Japan. Ito pangalan ng girlfriend niya. So he happens to like Japan, and if given the more time, he would want to stay more in Japan because ito yung mga na-realize niya. And of course, syempre, pag natagni-tagni mo na yan, so you have to relate them to their country. You have to relate them on their, let's say, puro mga doktor naman yung, or may mga doktor doon sa grupo mo, pwede mong sabihin na doktor siya. So, makaka-relate niya yung mga doktor. So, in that sense, ang sinasabi ni Tilden here is, know your market. So, target marketing lang naman din to. So, kailangan, nagsasalita ka, yung message, tina-target mo based on their personality, based on the experience of the visitors. So, yun ha. So, dapat nakaka-relate sila. Okay? Next. Information as such is not interpretation. Presenting information is not interpretation. Kung hindi siya interpretation, ano siya? The presentation, okay. Interpretation is revelation based upon information. So again, you have this information, but it's totally different from interpretation, ha? Okay. But they are entirely different things. However, all interpretation includes information. So, paano? Okay. Example, di ba? So, example natin. Okay, madali-daling example. Okay. So, information. Did you know that Pamantasan ng Maynila is located to a certain Cuartel de Real? So, that is a Spanish barrack. So, ano meron doon sa Spanish barrack na yan? So, during the trial of Dr. Serizal, was Dr. Serizal was imprisoned or castigated in that particular place sa ating lugar, sa ating campus ground. Ngayon, how would you make the interpretation? So, paano nating interpret? Sir, di ba, ba't meron siyang sinasabi mo, nasa PLM siya na imprison. Pero ba't meron siyang structure, meron siyang rebulto na naka-imprison siya sa Fort Santiago? Diba? Parang hindi yata nagja-jive yun. So parang no? So now, that's the time you put your interpretation na pwede mo sabihin na ito yung facts, no? First, Dr. Serizal was transferred to Fort Santiago for the reason that, of course, there are numerous threats, no, coming from the Katipunan that they may liberate Dr. Serizal, diba? So to prevent that, and of course to deter yung possible social unrest consequencing to the escape of Dr. Serizal and vice versa, so the Spanish authorities have transferred him to Fort Santiago for more secure location. Now, ano yung implication or interpretation doon? Interpretation doon is, number one, hindi pala sila sure. Okay, hindi pala sila sure masyado dun sa lugar nila. Bakit? Kasi, pag inanalyze mo siya, yung lugar na yon is may mga may mga halong mga Pilipino. Kasi 'di ba yung mga Guardia Civil, hindi naman sila purely Spanish. Okay. So, sa lugar na yon, may mas marami sigurong Pilipino kaya parang ah doubtful yung Spanish authority. Unlike pag for Santiago, it's mostly Spanish, di ba? Kasi yun ang pinaka-headquarter. So that is one angle that you can exploit, or one angle that you can use as your interpretation. Di ba? Ngayon, ano yan eh? Sir, ano evidence mo? Evidence dyan is, of course, syempre, tignan mo yung laki ng barracks. Kasi nga, laki ng barrack corresponds to the rank or yung rango ng mga opisyalis doon. So, mas malaki ang barracks, mas mataas ang rango. So, parang ano yan eh, presinto rin, no? I-compare mo, logic lang din yan. So, kung mas maliit ang presinto, of course, mababa ang rango ng mga commonly ang logic niya, mas mababa ang rango ng mga pulis dyan. Kung malaki yan, let's say, building, of course, mga general yan, diba? So, ganun din yan. So, you can have this interpretation. You can also look for other facets of interpretation. For example, yung cross, di ba? So, it could be a symbol for Jesus Christ, yung pinako si Jesus Christ. Though some scholar, despite that, na hindi daw sa cross or stake lang daw siya. Now, if you compare the interpretation, what is the interpretation of cross nowadays? Di ba? Parang it's a symbol of salvation, symbol of Christ, a sacrifice of Christ, etc. So, that is interpretation. Meron ka ng facts na, let's say, dyan na pako si Cruz, or dyan na namatay or napako si Jesus Christ. That's facts. No? Fact siya. Ngayon, ano yung interpretation mo? Diba? Ano yung hidden message or ano yung hidden value or relationship or revelation or value dun sa figure na yun? Yun nga, for Christian, we are saying na cross is a symbol of God's sacrifice for our sin, di ba? So hindi makaka-relate dyan yung ibang religion kasi they don't make sense of that, di ba? So that's our interpretation, di ba? Hindi siya facts eh. Facts makaka-relate yung ibang religion because that's facts, di ba? Interpretation, maaaring hindi, di ba? So yun na yun. Okay? Now, interpretation mo, again, should be related to your target market as prescribed by Principle 1. Okay. Again, information is not interpretation, it's merely presentation. Your interpretation is how you make sense or how you make value or how you reveal the hidden message of the information. Okay. Next. Interpretation is an art which combines many art. So pag sinabi natin art application, hindi po siya science. No? Hindi niya sinabing interpretation is a science. Pag kasi sinabi mo science, ano siya? Rigorous. Art based on practice. Okay? Application. Which combines many arts. Whether a material presents scientific, historical, or architecture, any art is some degree is teachable. So for example, Tilden is emphasizing that interpretation is a multidisciplinary process, meaning to say, we could look certain facts in a different angle, different perspective. For example, yung example ko nga kanina, di ba, kay Dr. Cerizal, he was imprisoned in our place in Pamantasan, so the Maynila. But for, of course, reason of security and because this area is less secure compared for Santiago, he was transferred to Fort Santiago. So yun siya. Now we can also look, that's based on a historical perspective. Now we could also use the other, let's say, psychological perspective. What's the psychological perspective there? We're not so sure if there is mas maraming Pilipino doon na maaring maging collaborators. You can also look for the psychological perspective na if Dr. Cerizal was imprisoned in Fort Santiago, it also shows how the magnitude or the degree of of priority that the government is giving to the case of Dr. Rizal. Na Dr. Rizal's case is not just your local issue. It's a national issue because you were in prison in the Fort Santiago. It makes headlines across the Philippines during those time. Kasi kung ordinary mamamayang ka lang naman, hindi ka na even in prison, bitay ka kagad, di ba? So, walang sense yung, walang sense kayo, you're not newsworthy. Ngayon, pag medyo may sinasabi yung family mo, may prison ka, pero sa ibang lugar, sa mga ibang kampo, hindi sa Port Santiago. Port Santiago is a premier yan, kumbaga sa lupa, real estate. Yan ang yung BGC yan, BGC. Kumbaga sa pag diyan ka nakulong, sikat ka. Yung mayabang ka, social, di ba? Kasi Fort Santiago, that's the premier locality. So yun. So you can also use the psychological or cultural perspective na itong case niya, hindi basta-basta siya because that is a serious case concerning national priority. And also, syempre, it will also force upon the authorities na let's say naka-escape sa Fort Santiago, di kaya ang Spanish government in the Philippines, di ba? So yun siya. They would want to, make sure na talagang siya, na it's a serious threat to them, di ba? Na priority talaga yung kaso niya. Now, you can also interpret that by also giving the possible scenarios. For example, what if kung hindi doon siya kinulong? Let's say hindi siya nilipat sa Fort Santiago, he remains in the PLM. What could happen? Ano kaya possible na nangyari? Makakatakas kaya siya? Kung nakatakas siya, ano kaya possible way nila palabas ng Fort Santiago? Dadaan ba sa Puerto Real or dadaan sa likod? So, yun nga. So, these are possible scenario for further exploration of the interpretation part. Okay, so yun siya ha. Next, the chief aim of interpretation is not to instruct, not to give a close sentence. Ito na yung facts. Hindi. It's not to give instruction, but to provoke learning. Yun nga, katulad ng ginagawa natin. Diba? Kasi nga, interpretations are not, of course, it's based on facts. It's based on figures, datas or details. But how you see the datas or details is totally dependent upon the lens of the viewers or the lens of the person who see the datas. Now, interpretation is not giving you the clear-cut answer. It's not an instruction. It's not a data, but it's giving you the benefit or it's lighting the spark of curiosity out of your individual logos or individual logic, diba? So, interpretation aims to provoke. It aims to make people interested. It means to challenge their mind, diba? So that's interpretation. Okay. Next. Interpretation should aim to present a whole rather than a part, must address itself to the whole man rather than any face. Okay. So yun nga, one of the sad parts na what I noticed with our tour is that mostly yung mga tour guide natin, nagpo-focus na lang siya individually dun sa lugar. Let's say, San Agustin, ano nangyari sa San Agustin? For Santiago, ano nangyari sa For Santiago? Manila Cathedral, ano nangyari sa Manila Cathedral? They are not, these are separate, you can treat that as separate parts. But of course, less yung value niya if you don't create a theme or thematic approach on how would you interrelate these three structures that define the course of the history in the Philippines, no? So, syempre, may interrelationship yan, tatlong yan. Diba? What's the interrelationship of these three edifices? Diba? How does pwede mo sabihin, how does it endure during that time? Diba? So, from Spanish time, American time, and of course, our current time. So, anong significance niya? So, syempre, kung hindi mo siya i-interrelate sa isa't isa, parang mas less yung impact niya sa tourists. As if you are parang merely presenting lang talaga. Okay? Of course, part of the interrelation or the part of what Tilden is trying to convey here is not just the whole, but rather the whole man. So, meaning to say, kasama din dyan yung tourist mo. Kasama rin dyan yung viewer mo. You have to incorporate them to the story. Kasi parang, di ba, yung tourist natin, we are trying to put them as the, of course, hindi, kasi ang story dito is, yung tourist mo, hindi lang tayo, as tour guide, hindi lang tayo yung actor. Sila yung actor. Gusto natin sila yung maging actor ng story ginagawa natin. Kasi karamihan ng tour natin, ginagawa lang is parang walkthrough. O kayo, mga ano lang kayo, mga audience lang kayo. Ito yung story ko, di ba? Ako yung tour guide, ako yung actor. Parang ganon. Hindi. What Tilden is trying to convey, though syempre medyo mahirap sa part ng tour guide, through practice kaya yan, is what we're trying to do here is that we want the tourists to become part of the story, not just the audience watching the story unfolds, but become the player, become part of the story here. So kasama, kaya we're trying to attempt to incorporate their, psyche in the story. We're trying to attempt to incorporate their narrative to the story, diba? So ganun siya. Next is interpretation addressed to children, say up to the age of 12, should not be a delusion of the presentation to adults, but should follow a fundamentally different approach. To be as its best, it is required a separate program. So meaning to say, it's a challenge for tour guide kasi sometimes magkahalo yung bata sa matanda. So ngayon, of course, syempre yung bata, they have a different narrative, no? Kasi iba yung level of comprehensions natin, no? Pero hindi na necessarily ibibigay natin yung diluted. Siguro yung approach would be different, no? As mentioned by Tilden. Maaring kay bata more of parang perspective ng bata ang gagamitin natin. So for example, ikaw si Dr. Sarizal, ano mafe-feel mo kung makukulong ka, di ba? Parang full mo yung story. Now, kung matanda naman, di mo pwedeng ganun ang approach natin, di ba? Parang sa tingin mo, let's say you are Dr. Sarizal, in that situation, where parang what are you trying to do as a, kasi yung perspective niya adult man, yung perspective naman niya is perspective of child, di ba? Parang it's a matter of approach. But this one is really challenging. Kahit sa akin, challenging to. Kasi may mga tour guide na magaling siya. Mostly lahat ng tour guide magaling for adult, but for children, hindi lahat. Kasi kaya nga, di ba, sa doktor nga, di ba, doktor na medicine na, meron tayong specific field for mga bata na titingin. Kasi iba yung physiology niya, iba yung physical, niya, no? Kaya nga tayo may pedya. So, may iba yung pedya, iba yung sa pangmatanda. So, ganun din So, ganun din sa tour guide. But of course, syempre, karamihan ng tour guide, especially sa pangmatanda. Okay. Kasi medyo medyo kailangan mahilig ka sa bata saka first approach. But for me, it's sad to say, medyo hindi tayo ganun ka children friendly. Okay? Next. So what is presentation versus interpretation? How does it differ from one another? When you say presentation, the goal is to inform and instruct, while interpretation, your goal is to stimulate or provoke one's thinking. Parang, oo nga no, ganun pala. Diba? For example, who is our national hero? Dr. Sarizal. That's presentation. Now, if I ask you a question, why do you think Dr. Sarizal is our national hero? Diba? It's more a provocation na. Diba? Bakit? Bakit nga ba siya? Okay. There are some juries. Okay. For example, among the commissioner who is, are there Filipino included in the commission? Meron ba? Diba? Kasi kung may Filipino doon, of course, it might a different story. Or perhaps kung may Filipino man sa commission, or they have consulted some Filipino expert, it might be a different. Now, second is, what is the agenda or what's the hidden message while selecting Dr. Sarizal as our national hero? Of course, syempre, culturally dependent yan, diba? So, syempre, gusto natin yung mga tao or Filipino culture kasi pag ang bahay walang piano, parang hindi ka successful, di ba? Mga gano'n. Pag ang bahay wala kang piano, pag ang bahay ay walang muebles, parang you're not successful. So, of course, it also defines the culture, social dynamics during those times. Na if you are educated, you study abroad, you are from the Ilustrado, you know how to speak different languages, and you are well versed in laws. Okay, so in general society, you're successful because you know you are indeed a best reflection of uh, a well-groomed Filipino. Unlike if other national hero pipiliin, let's say Macario Sakay, di ba parang long hair, di ba? Yeah. So these are part of the interpretations. Okay, it stimulates your provocation. Okay, next. Presentation tends to detail focus or part specific, while interpretation as what Tilden would want to mention is that it's a story focus. It calls about integration of each separate component into one, and one of that is to have you have to include the tourist as part of the story. Next, presentation is linear thinking in a way na parang dire-diretso lang siya. Pa, 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 pa. But sad to say, history in our culture, yung dinidiscuss natin mga bagay-bagay sa tour guiding, is not linear. It's multi, di ba? May nangyayari dito sa lugar natin. May nangyayari sa Madrid. May nangyayari sa New York. May nangyayari sa Washington. That might have a impact to our place, di ba? So ngayon, sa interpretation calls about multidisciplinary thinking. Kasi nga, history is not linear in a way. So it's just presented linearly, pero hindi siya linear. Okay? Yan. Next. Okay. So lastly, so these are some techniques that you might consider in delivering your commentaries. So first one is always have an introduction. You have to introduce yourself. So nothing really so much dumb or so much incompetent na you forgot to say what's your name and the name of your driver. Okay, common sense siya. So you have to, of course, introduce yourself to gain trust and rapport. Next, use simple and easy to understand words. Avoid jargon, avoid Frenchant words all the time. Kasi level na English ng ating kliyente, we're not so certain about the level of their education, the level of their familiarity, mastery of the English language. So it's better yet to stay focused on the most easiest words or most simpler way of saying things. No, mas okay siya. Next, involves audience and various stakeholder. Parang peg mo dyan, reporter ka, di ba pagod ka na magsalita, kakadaldal mo, ang dami mong sinabi. So minsan, nakapapagod ka na rin, saka para mas interactive, tanong ka sa audience or tanongin mo yung mga turista mo. Okay. Also, kung wala naman may gusto magsalita dyan, pwede mo tanongin yung mga other tao dun sa lugar. For example, nasa isang park ka, nasa isang museum ka, pwede mo tanongin siguro yung museum curator for other information. Pwede mo tanongin yung artist na nag-exhibit, di ba? It might, of course, yung artist na nag-exhibit might express yung kanyang different perspective na pwede mag-enrich ng tour mo. Di ba? Parang added value yun eh. Let's say, kung isang local ka, nasa outdoor ka, pwede ka mag-interview ng fisherman na nagatid sa or boatman nagatid sa inyo, di ba? Pwedeng ganon. Added way of making the tour participative. Hindi lang siya parang, ganun lang. Next. This one is avoid direct no. So, sometimes we have to say no, but instead, we should offer alternative. No lang. So, can I, Mr. Tour Guide, can I, what do you call this? Can I buy this thing and I just leave it in the bus? Okay. And later, I will just get it. So, ikaw naman, no. Diba? No ka kagad. Wala kang binigay na alternative. Diba? No. Diba? So, syempre, bibigyan mo siya alternative. Diba? Na pwede mo, okay, I think you can buy that, ma'am, but it's a duty-free product. So, if it's a duty-free product, you have to you have to get the product at the airport, or you will have to pay it now, present the receipt later on upon your departure at the airport, and the company representative at the airport will give you the product. So that's how we do duty-free because if you use that product here in the Philippines, it's subject for tax. Mga ganun. So you have to explain, offer alternative. Yeah. So these things. Next, limit numbers and figures. Yan. Ako sa totoo lang, ayoko ng mga numbers. Mahina ako sa math eh. Limit numbers and figures. So wala naman siguro ang tao na gusto makarinig na 1875, then followed by 1888, then followed by 19022, ganyan. And then followed by 1925, and then followed by the World War II in 1940 to 1942, di ba? Parang, wow, di ba? So, syempre gusto na natin marinig yung mga magandang ano. So, avoid natin mga numbers and figures. So, what's our alternative? My alternative is that, for example, it's a Spanish period, 1875. Pwede ko naman sabihin 18th century or during the days of Dr. Rizal when he was incarcerated or he was in prison at the Fort Santiago or or after the Spanish Revolution, mga ganun. Or Spanish period in the Philippines, di ba? Parang we can have that in, let's say, medieval period or medieval Europe or pre-Spanish or pre-colonial period na Philippines during the time of the Raha or the dawn of the Raha and Lacan in Luzon, mga ganon. So mas better siya kaysa din sa numbers and figures. Now, if you're talking with, it should be client sensitive din, no? For example, you're talking with Chinese people. So, syempre, pakialam nila sa 18th century. Meron nga silang sariling calendar, di ba? So, syempre, i-relate mo naman during the Tang Dynasty, the Philippines is like this, di ba? During the Ming Dynasty, Philippines has an envoy, but it is, of course, you all know, governed by the Spanish authority, ganyan. So, you can also relate that based on the market type. So, kung Chinese siya, you can use Tang Ming Dynasty, whatsoever yung pinaka-common time reference period for that. Okay? Next is, don't state facts, tell them story. Tour guiding, I believe tour guiding is not just stating facts, but we are stating stories that, of course, should be reliable and convincible. And of course, we don't change the story or the narrative of the story to fit in with our own personal biases or personal interest, no? So the story should be, of course, historically accurate, reflective of our current situation, and of course, culturally and historically insightful. So this is the story. Okay. So in tour guiding, we don't state facts, but we state story because story lasts, facts fade. Diba? Okay, tandaan yan ha. Story lasts, facts fade. Diba? So for example, nagbasa ka ng dyaryo, natandaan mo ba yung facts ng binasa mo sa The Staircase? O, syempre hindi, di ba? Ano natandaan mo? Yung story, di ba? Ano yung story ng The Staircase? Kasi, di ba, may party, may alleged na rape daw, gano'n, etc. So, yun natatandaan mo. Pero yung narrative, yung pangalan ng, kahit nga pangalan siguro ng victim, yung first name niya, kalimutan mo na eh. Facts yun, di ba? See? So, again, facts fade, stories stay. Di ba? Next. Use name as much as possible, so nothing really, the music to the ears of our client or any person will be their name. Recap the commentary. So if your commentary is too long, you just have to recap, or repetition is the best policy pa rin. So if you have to repeat, especially mga mandatory or compulsory or ating required commentaries, it should be repeat. Diba? May repetition talaga. Kasi nga, may bingi. May bingi. So, may mga ganang tao. Ako nga, minsan, may nakasulat pa ako, binibigay ko pa siya. O, sige, limit ha. May picture pa yun. Para walang sisihan later on. Nay, of course, lastly, but you have to say thanks and appreciation for their effort. Na nakinig naman sila sa'yo, diba? So, syempre, 8 hours ka nagsasalita doon. So, nakinig sila. Palakpakan, diba? Yan. Okay. Oops. Yan. So, to end our discussion, here's the topic outline again for the summary. Tour guide do's and don'ts. The most essential do is, of course, to be honest and sincere. The most essential don'ts is, of course, don't insinuate for tips na kakaya itsura mo, okay? Next, types of commentaries. We have 4 types of commentaries. Number 1, we have the required. Ito yung mga essentials or kailangan based on, these are the necessity and the conduct of our tour. Next would be information, informative. These are the facts and figures of the place. Next would be the um, requested. So these are the Q&A and of course the optional natin. Okay. Next source of commentaries, we have two sources. We have the first hand or the primary data, which is yung based on your experience, based on personal observation, and of course experience in the place. Second will be the secondary data led by yun nga, mga scholastic publication, reputable book, and of course institutional publications natin. No? So it could be used as your reference for your tour, spiel, or commentaries. Next would be the presentation and interpretation. We said that there is a difference between the two. Presentation is basically presenting the subtle facts or yung kanilang superficial facts. Interpretation is not the presentation, but instead it is trying to provoke the critical you or the trying to provoke uh, the hidden meaning or the hidden narrative out of the story. So yun nga. Presentation creates the story, but what makes it interesting is your interpretation because you can see it on your own on a personal level that should be related to the needs, the psyche, the personality, and experience of your tourists. Yan. Of course, finally, of course, the techniques in delivering commentaries. Ang pinakamagandang technique na may share ko would be, yeah, you have to always be thankful and appreciative of their efforts, no? So, syempre, mafe-feel naman nila na you value your tourists even though, of course, syempre, mega effort ka. Pero, of course, nag-effort din naman yung tourist mo to listen to you. So, you might as well as appreciate these things because this really matters to them. Okay? So, that's all. Okay. And before I end, it's my question for your I mean, for your interpretation or for your participation is, why is guesswork and propaganda is discouraged in tour guiding? Bakit kaya? So, of course, syempre may reason yan, no? Why is guesswork and propaganda is discouraged in tour guiding? So, answer that. Please comment and suggest. So, answer that question in our comment box. And of course, if hindi pa kayo nakasubscribe, subscribe na kayo. Of course, if you have time, if you have know somebody who's taking a tour guiding class, you may also share this video to them. Okay? So thank you very much. And of course, I really appreciate your time and effort from listening to this video recording. And okay, so hopefully we could, kung hindi ngayong semester na to, hopefully in other opportunity, we'll be given the chance to really conduct the actual tour. So maraming salamat. Bye-bye.